What's up, everyone? It's me, Johnny. I hope you're doing all right. I'm really glad that you enjoyed the last video I made where we combined together different pieces of UFC news in the one video, because we're going to be doing it again today. First up, let's talk about a fight that was just booked in the UFC's flyweight division between Brandon Royval and Tatsuro Taira. Second of all, I want to talk about what's been happening in the lightweight division and who might Dan Hooker fight next, and also some of the other potential matchups that we could get as the weeks and months go on. And finally, I want to talk about heavyweight. Tom Aspinall apparently is signed on to be the backup fighter for the Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic fight. The UFC is still pressing forward with that fight, and Tom Aspinall is getting a little salty, and understandably. So let's talk about all of that. If you enjoy this video and want to see more content from me and MMArcade, please like, subscribe if you're new, with notifications if that's possible. But let's get into this flyweight bout between Brandon Royval and Tatsuro Taira. So they are set to fight at UFC Vegas 98 on the 12th of October. So pretty soon, and Royval, of course, is ranked first in the division after his split decision victory over Brandon Moreno. I always get those two confused, Brandon. And then Tatsuro Taira, of course, is ranked fifth in the division. He's been doing incredibly well. Recently, he just got a TKO victory over Alex Perez. I didn't even know what that thing was called, where he was mounting him and pulled him down and he ruined his knee. Really brutal for Alex Perez. I think it actually has an official name. Some people were calling it an Atatsu lock. I don't know if that's true, but it was an impressive victory. Taira is doing great things in the division, and now he is set to fight Brandon Royval. So I really do think this is going to be a fun fight. It's good booking. You've got Royval's unorthodox striking, his ground game, and also Taira is just very well-rounded. He's getting TKOs, he's submitting people. It's a fun fight, and I do believe this is absolutely the fight to make. So Moreno lost to Royval. So Moreno's in a bit of a tough position. Obviously, he's not going to be fighting someone like Taira. He's not going to be fighting someone like Royval, right? I think these are the two fighters that need to be fighting together. Also, as well, Amir Albazi is apparently still dealing with his injury. What was it? It was a neck injury. That's why he had to pull out in his previous fight, or from his previous fight with Moreno, I believe it was. So he's not going to be booked. Kai Kara-France, of course, just knocked out Steve Erceg. I still really feel bad for my boy Steve. He will be back though, but of course Kai Kara-France is arguably in line for a title shot. It's been a while since he fought Pantoja, and that wasn't tough, and it was a 2-rounder. So I believe that he actually has a very strong claim to be in line for a title shot. Now, this fight between Royval and Taira isn't officially labeled as a title eliminator. Unofficially, it might as well be, you know what I mean? You could have Kai Kara-France fight Pantoja, and then the winner of Taira and Royval fights the winner of Kai Kara-France and Pantoja. That was really confusing. Hopefully that made a lot of sense. I think that could be a good way to do it. Or, of course, you could have Kai Kara-France fight the winner or Royval versus Taira. Depending upon where they want to go, that would just mean, though, that Pantoja's sitting there for a while. I know that he wants to. I think he said recently that he was taking a bit of time just to see how the division played out. So you could do that, but you're talking about potentially having Pantoja sit out for almost a year. So if you want to get him in the ring or the octagon as soon as possible, have Pantoja fight Kai Kara-France, and then the winner of that fights the winner of Royval and Tatsuro Taira. I think that is the best way to go about it. And flyweight, man, it's really heating up. I would say it's probably best to also as well book Brandon Moreno against someone like Amir Albazi. I think Moreno is taking some time as well. And as I said, Albazi is recovering from his neck injury. So give them both time, put them together. I think that's also a great fight to make. Kai Asakura, of course, is the new signing in the UFC. We're all interested to see who he could fight next. I think if Alex Perez didn't have that knee injury after his fight with Taira, probably Kai Asakura against Alex Perez, that would have been a really good fight. Possibly even Mateus Nicolau. I'm not too sure what he's doing at the moment. I think Steve Erceg needs to rest, and don't put him up against someone like Kai Asakura. I think Steve needs a little bit of a tune-up fight. He had a very, very hard fight against Pantoja. Ultimately lost. Some people thought he won, but ultimately lost. He thought he lost as well. But it was a very, very close fight. Again, if he doesn't go for that takedown in the 5th round, he's probably your champion, right? So Steve Erceg, I think he needs to rest, and I think a better fight for him is someone like Manel Kape. Still someone that's ranked in the top 10, I think Kape is. I think is one rank below Steve Miocic. And it doesn't get him too far away from the top 5, but still an easier fight than I think Kaya Sakura would be, just given, you know, his reputation coming into the UFC. And also he's trying to prove a point in his first fight. So I would say probably Mateus Nicolau if Alex Perez can't get, you know, recovered in time with his injury, which looked pretty nasty. And also as well, apparently Henry Cejudo wants to drop back down to flyweight. He's not happy with how he's doing in his current division. Obviously, he has 2 losses, so he could drop down to flyweight. I think he possibly sees an easier path to a title if he drops down to flyweight. But I don't know. I don't know if that's true. That, as I said, the division is heating up. There are some genuine contenders there. Again, you've got Emir Albazi, you've got Kaya Sakura, you've got Tatsuro Taira, Royval still doing his thing. And I do believe one day Steve Miocic will be right back up there. He just needs another good fight or two, and I think he'll be, you know, right back in that conversation. But Henrik Cejudo could throw himself into the mix and mix things up. So that'll be very, very interesting. Now, the biggest talking point, or at least one of the biggest talking points from this Tatsuro Taira fight versus Brandon Royval, is that people are upset it's not on a pay-per-view. Now, look, I don't necessarily think having a fight being on a fight night necessarily means it's bad booking, right? Of course, let's look at an example with Rob. You had Rob meaning to fight Khamzat Chimaev on a fight night card. It was in Saudi Arabia, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. The bad thing is the location. It's the setting. When we talk about Rob against Khamzat Chimaev, at least before Khamzat Chimaev pulled out, it was in Saudi Arabia. It was in front of a decent crowd. But this fight night is going to be at the Apex. That's the big thing. It's not about being a pay-per-view or being on a fight night. That's not the big question. It's about where it is. And unfortunately, those fight nights a lot of the time are in the Apex. And the Apex, man, look, I love it because it's a different vibe. It's a different atmosphere. You can hear every bloody punch. So it makes for a very, very interesting fight to watch. But there's no doubt, if this is potentially a title eliminator, or what could be a title eliminator, you want it to happen in front of a crowd. You want it to happen in in an actual arena, and in all likelihood that is on an actual pay-per-view, right? And it's probably not going to main event anything like that, but it could be a nice co-main. You just had Steve Miocic against Kara France as the co-main for UFC 305. Granted, that was an Aussie versus a Kiwi in Perth, so it made a lot of sense. But why not do that? That was a fun fight. You had a knockout. Put the flyweights on a little bit. Help the division out. I know that division has always had its issues with the UFC, and it could have been cut or whatever, but booking him on not just a fight night, but also in the Apex isn't really helping the situation, especially when it's such a top-billed fight, when you have someone like Tatsuro Taira against Brandon Royval, 2 people that arguably could be in line for the title shot next. Do you really want to put them in the Apex? I think that is a bad call. So I'm not against the fight nights. It's more the location. It's more the setting. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But next up, let's talk about lightweight. So as we know, Dan Hooker beat Mateusz Gamrot at UFC 305 in a belter of a fight. It was a banger of a fight. Very, very good fight. And I know a lot of people thought that Gamrot won. I still think Dan Hooker pipped it. When you look at the rounds, Gamrot takes 1. Dan Hooker takes 2 because of the elbows, and I think he also took 3 as well. But it was a close fight. Either way, Gamrot's going to be back for sure. But Dan Hooker, officially, he did win the fight. He is now ranked 5th in the lightweight division. So a lot of people are chatting about who he's going to fight next, including Dan. So Dan says that apparently the UFC want him to fight Charles Oliveira next. I think that's a very good fight. That's, 2 people that a lot of the fans really like. It's going to be a banger of the fight. Charles never disappoints. Dan Hooker absolutely never disappoints. So it's going to be very interesting. I think Dan Hooker's going to want them to stay on the feet and bang. Charles Oliveira is going to try and do his jiu-jitsu, but of course, he's a great striker as well. But we saw in that Gamrot fight how bloody hard Dan Hooker can be to take down. So I think it's an incredible matchup. But Dan also said there's other cool stuff that he could be doing in that division. He says he doesn't care. He'll fight anyone. He's name-dropped Conor McGregor like every bloody other person in the UFC. He's also mentioned Arman, and the Arman one is interesting because Arman Tsarukyan, of course, is meant to be fighting Islam Makhachev next after he gets rid of his suspension, whatever the hell he did when he attacked that fan, right? But apparently, Islam Makhachev could be injured. I think he's got something wrong with his hand. It's not official yet, but there's some murmurings, there's some rumors in that regard. So If Islam Makhachev happens to be injured, then absolutely, in my opinion, the fight to make is Dan Hooker versus Arman Tsarukyan for the interim title. That would be a very, very good thing to do if Islam Makhachev can't fight anytime soon. If he can, obviously he fights Arman Tsarukyan and then Dan Hooker fights Charles Oliveira. I think that is the best booking to make, but we don't know if Islam is actually injured. I'm just going off of rumors that I've seen. He's probably going to be fine and they'll probably fight. I don't know if it's going to be this year. If he has the injury, they might want to push it back a month or two and do it at the start of next year. But I think that is going to be the best matchups to make. And Dan wants to fight by the end of the year as well. So if, Tsarukyan again is set to be fighting Islam at some stage, then probably you have Dan fight Charles Oliveira if Charles is obviously ready. I don't know how much damage Charles took in his fight with Tsarukyan. He ended the fight pretty strongly. So I think he will probably be ready by the end of the year. But fighters are always having injuries. Let's see what happens. Now, in terms of other fights for lightweight is in a bit of a weird position right now because a lot of those top guys, excluding Arman Tsarukyan, were coming off losses, right? Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, and also as well Charles Oliveira. So I think the best fight to make when it comes to names like Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier is have them fight together. Like, Dustin has said that he doesn't want to work his way back up the rankings. He's done this for a long time. That doesn't interest him anymore. But he still clearly wants to fight. I think he just wants an interesting fight, something that is really great on paper, that is doing good things, aside from him just, fighting another contender and working back up the ranks. I think he just wants a banger of a fight that's going to please the fans, that's interesting on paper, and where he can make a lot of money. And I think the best thing to do is have him fight Gaethje, right? It's a trilogy. It's a trilogy waiting to be made. It's going to be it would be a fun fight, of course. Every time those dudes have fought, it's been a banger. So let them run them back for the third time and let's see who is the better fighter between the two. Obviously, both are coming off losses as well. Yes, Dustin Poirier just lost to Justin Gaethje, but Gaethje is also coming off a knockout loss from Max Holloway. So they're both in a bit of a compromised position. I think that's a great fight to make. Easy booking, trilogy. It's going to be a big hype, big marketing. Easy booking there. You're welcome, UFC. You can pay me later for that one. But also as well, what about Chandler? Chandler is probably going to be fighting Conor McGregor. I know we keep talking about this fight, and it might never happen. Conor McGregor might not ever fight in the UFC ever again, but they both seem intent on doing it, and I think they both want to fight in December. The only person seemingly that doesn't want them to fight in December is Dana White. He's been asked about this, about whether Conor McGregor is going to fight this year, and he's just like, no, it's not going to happen. Even though after that, Conor McGregor was like, hey, I'm ready to fight December. Let's do it. Chandler was like, yeah, let's do it December. I don't think the UFC and Dana in particular wants to do it. They don't want to repeat of last time where Conor gets injured. It's a weird spot for them. And I think part of the issue as well is that any card they have Conor on, because he demands such a salary, that's going to be the main event. You're not going to have another title shot on there. And that because the UFC is probably going to be losing a lot of money from that card if they're paying Conor and obviously Chandler through implication a gargantuan amount of money. So I'm thinking they're trying to line up another card in the new year to have them fight as the main event. And that's probably why he doesn't want them to fight in December. That's just my speculation, but I think eventually we will see Chandler versus Conor McGregor. Also as well, Renato Moicano, he's fighting Benoit Saint Denis this month as well, so they're obviously booked. You could have a Beneil Dariush against Gamrot to see if Gamrot can get his win back. Obviously, Dariush beat Gamrot, and Dariush is coming off a loss. Gamrot is coming off a loss. I think that's a good rematch to have. Fiziev, I think he's still rehabbing an injury. You obviously have Paddy Pimblett in the mix as well. I don't want to see Paddy fight too high off the card. He mentioned that he thinks a fight with Dan Hooker would be exciting in the future, but I think he was much more forward-looking than that. He was saying in the future, not next. So Paddy Pimblett is still lurking around, and obviously he looked incredibly good against Bobby Green. So lightweight has some very interesting matchups to be made. Let me know what you think in the comments below about my matchups. And then finally, let's talk about Tom Aspinall. So Tom Aspinall, at least according to him, is going to be the backup fighter for the Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic inevitable fight. It's not actually booked officially yet, which is kind of crazy. Jones obviously got injured and they haven't booked it officially, but the water cooler talk, the rumor around the mill is that it's going to be at MSG in, was it November is the MSG card? UFC 309, that's right, in November. So that's probably going to be the fight that they make, and let's see when it's actually officially announced. They're probably waiting to see how Jones is actually doing. And Dana and the UFC seem absolutely intent on making this fight. They're going to book this fight. No one can convince Dana White otherwise. They are making Stipe Miocic against Jon Jones for that title. And Tom Aspinall, even as the interim champ, even as an interim champ that has defended his interim belt, he's going to have to sit on his hands. So because of that, Tom says he's training and he's going to be ready to jump in whenever. No matter who pulls out of this fight, whether it's Jones or Stipe, he'll be ready to jump in. And of course he will. Like, look what he did against Pavlovich. He'll jump in and probably get a knockout. I seriously believe, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I seriously believe that Aspinall can knock out Jon Jones. He's obviously going to knock out Stipe. Stipe is old at the moment, right? Greatest heavyweight of all time, but he is old. He's 42 or whatever. But obviously the Jones fight is a little bit more up in the air. I genuinely believe Tom Aspinall can knock him out. He can knock anybody out. I love that dude. He is such a good fighter. And there are apparently rumors as well that Stipe might have been injured, but Stipe uploaded a tweet saying that that's absolutely fake news. So Tom Aspinall is ready to go. And let's remember as well, Stipe, he wasn't the one that pulled out. Like, he has been ready to go for a while now. It's been Jon Jones. Jon Jones has been the issue in many regards, whether it's fighting Stipe or not wanting to fight Tom Aspinall. So because of that, Tom Aspinall is continuing to troll Jon Jones and trying to demand this heavyweight shot. He used to be very friendly about it, but he's picking up his game. He's trolling him on Instagram. Even DC is appreciating that, saying when you're a bit more aggressive than that, it's good. It's good when you're not trying to be all nice guy, because I love Tom Aspinall for that, but I don't think that was getting him anywhere. So poking the bear, trolling Jon Jones, I think that's the better way to try and hype the fight, which I think is an inevitability if Jones doesn't retire. But also as well, it probably irks Jones a little bit and gets him to respond. I think is a good way to go about it, right? He even said recently, Aspinall, that he's going to retire Jones without even fighting him. That is the coldest line ever. He's doing such a great job. But speaking of retirement, could Jon Jones actually retire after Stipe Miocic and beating him? Presumably, he's going to beat Stipe Miocic. Every chance that Stipe actually wins. But if he does beat Stipe, yeah, there is a chance he could retire and Aspinall never fights Jon Jones, and Aspinall is just made the undisputed champion, right? Without actually... Yes, he fought for it technically, of course, but without having that official fight with Jon Jones to show that. So there's every chance. The dude is 37. If he goes on to beat Stipe in November, if that's when they fight, by the time the Aspinall fight is booked, if it's going to be booked, if he doesn't retire, he'll probably be close to 38 at that stage. That's the time where you start thinking about, hanging out the boots, if not earlier. So an almost 38 Jon Jones versus a very young, hungry Tom Aspinall, he might not want to risk it. He might not want to risk his legacy. He might not see the need to. He's about to make he's already made a bunch of money, but he's about to make a bunch of money when fighting Stipe Miocic. Both of those dudes are, and I think that's also why the UFC is making that fight. So I get that. But he's about to make a bunch of money. He might just want to sit on his throne and retire and say, no one was able to beat me, and I'm not going to risk my career. I'm not going to risk my legacy fighting at almost 38 against a guy like Tom Aspinall. That's probably where he's coming from when he's hinting that he's going to retire after this fight. But also, he might want to be like, you know what? I want to knock this dude out. I want to finish this dude, and then I'll retire. Then no one can actually dispute my claim to be the greatest fighter of all time. The number one pound for pound guy. Jon Jones is the number one pound for pound fighter, if you ask Dana White anyways. So they do need to sort out this nonsense, by the way, and I'm going to finish the video on this. Tom says that they're holding the belt hostage. I do agree a little bit. It's weird to see an interim belt defended, but it's also especially weird to see not only that, but also as well, the interim belt holder not fighting for the title next, having someone else completely in the form of Stipe Miocic fighting the undisputed champ. Both of those things are weird. I would prefer, obviously, Tom Aspinall against Jon Jones. Book that at MSG. Book that in November. And I think that's actually a better fight. It's a better fight. It's a younger dude. I think that gets more hype up. There's more marketing. You got two belts. It would be perfect. I don't really care for this Stipe Miocic fight. I really, really don't. I think they're doing it just to pay back Stipe. He's been a loyal fighter for the UFC. He's the greatest heavyweight of all time. I think that's the reason why they're doing it. But I think most people would much rather prefer to see Jones versus Tom Aspinall. I think it probably sells better. But either way, they're going to sell this thing out anyways. But it's more about the pay-per-view buys. What does better? Jones versus Stipe or Jones versus Tom Aspinall? I don't know. I would lean towards Aspinall. I think more people would be interested in that, but Miocic has the name as well. Like more casual fans that maybe haven't watched the UFC in a while, they'd recognize the name Stipe Miocic more than Tom Aspinall. That's just me speculating, so maybe it does sell more. I don't know. I'm torn. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And again, let me know what you thought of this style of video. We should be back tomorrow for the podcast if I can wrangle Rob together, but let me know your thoughts. And until next time, this has been Johnny. Please take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.